Good morning, students. Today we will be discussing on the topic interview method. As we know that there are different methods of data collection. So, the task of data collection begins just after a research problem has been defined. While deciding about the method of data collection, prominently there are two types of data collection method. First is known as the primary data and the second is known as the secondary data. So, what is a primary data? Data which are collected afresh and for the first time as happen to be original in nature. Such data is known as primary data. The secondary data, or those data which has been already collected by someone else and which has already been passed through the statistical analysis process. Now, what are the different methods of data collection? We know that as a psychology students, there are different methods of data collection. Some of the common methods used as are observation method, interview method, collection of data through questionnaires, and collection of data through schedules. Some other methods that are less frequently used are warranty cards, distributors or store audits, pantry audits, consumer panels, use of mechanical devices, projective techniques, and depth interviews. Now, let's come up to the topic, interview method. So, interview. It is a face-to-face interaction between two individuals. The former is known as the interviewer and the latter is known as the interviewee. So, the purpose of an interview is to elicit some desired information from the latter. It is a social process, and for the success of an interview, one must take care of the interaction between the interviewer and the respondent. There are different types of interview, formal interview and informal interview. Now, let's look into what is known as the formal interview. In a formal interview, there are a set of questions that has been already prepared and be asked by an interviewer in a very standardized form. It is otherwise known as a structured interview or a patterned interview. What are the advantages of such interview? They are very highly systematic procedures, higher validity is being reported, and as the interview is highly structured, relatively a less trained interviewer can also conduct such interview very smoothly. So, what are the limitations of such interview? They are very expensive and time consuming. The validities are usually less than the biodata analysis and standardized psychological tests. So, it is a very important drawbacks of formal interview. Now, coming into the informal interview. It is the one in which there are no predetermined questions nor having a set of order of questions. It is otherwise known as an unstructured interview. Now, let's look into what are the advantages of such interviews. They are the most common and flexible methods of data collection. The informal interview. The interviewer tried to get a deeper understanding of their respondents. Thus, it is like a digging deeper into the behavior of the respondents. Now, let's look into the limitations or drawbacks of such interview. They can be biased and less reliable. The interviewer must be highly talented and expert. Otherwise, they might deviate or the scope of the informal interview is very limited. The data obtained from an informal interview is difficult to quantify and analyze. Now, let's look into the other types of interview based on the way of collecting data. These are known as telephonic interview, focused interview, clinical interview, non-directive interview, panel technique. Now, let's come into the functions of an interview. An interview basically focuses to describe a human behavior as well as to explore the unknown facts of a human behavior. Thus, let's look into the factors that can affect the uses of interview. The first and the foremost factor is the characteristics of an interviewer. second is the characteristics of the interviewee. And the third is the nature of the problem under study. Now, let's look into the general advantages of interview. Interview allows us for a greater flexibility, and we can obtain a desired information very readily and quickly. Thus, it saves us time. And there is an increased validity of the conclusions. A desired level of control can be exercised. The validity of the verbal informations can be easily checked on the basis of their non-verbal cues. Now, what are the limitations of interview? The interviewer's variability, inter-interviewer variability, validity, and dependability of verbal responses. Time is also another constraint in the field of limitations of interview. Variations inherent to the interviewing context. Recording informations. Now, what are the sources of errors in interview? It is the attitude of the interviewer, lack of understanding about the questions being asked, lack of warmth in situations of interview, that is, when there is a difficulty in forming a rapport relationship, lack of motivation in the respondents, and the length or the duration of the interview. So, what are the factors that should be considered in the selection and training of an interviewer? It is the honesty, accuracy, adaptability, interest, and temperament. So, let's conclude. Interview is one of the best options among different data collection methods, not only for psychologists, but also for a sociologist, an educationist, and an economist, and a political worker, due to its high validity and reliability. Thank you.